so bright and early on a Sunday morning? Why aren't you all in church? Right now. It's so good to see you, and so good to be here in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's balmy and warm, not only outside, but inside as well. You guys are very warm and welcoming, and some of you are hot as well. I want to, first of all, thank you all, particularly the gray hairs and the shiny paints that I see out there, because you are the ones that made it possible for us to get to this point in the year 2011, the 21st century, where we're celebrating, or this September, we'll be celebrating the 45th anniversary of Star Trek. And it's the gray hairs and the shiny paints that have been with us for that long. So thank you all very much. But the wonderful thing about this whole Star Trek phenomenon is that we do have not only the next generation, but the generation after that now. We have a third and fourth generation that show up at conventions and that are avid supporters. So it's not just the gray hairs and the shiny paints. You guys are all giving us a future as well. And the future, I think, despite all the challenges that we've had, looks very good. And I see it with the people here at the convention. Yesterday, the people that I saw really reflect one of the key ideals of Star Trek: infinite diversity and infinite combinations. I saw so many wonderful people that have so many wonderful stories to tell about themselves. I saw a young couple with two Asian little girls and an Asian little boy that they were carrying, which represents part of what Gene Roddenberry wanted to see. And I see certainly all of the diversity of America here at this convention. And those people that want me to say, oh my, represents that other diversity that I found on radio of all things. But this is the 21st century radio. It's not terrestrial, it's satellite. So that's connected me with a whole different new audience. And thank you all, and good to see some of you here. They want me to sign to Joe, oh my. I used to write galactic greetings or live long and prosper, but I love oh my because it's so easy to write. And so I want to thank you all for the many, many gifts that you've given me. And we have a great future, and we're going to work together as Gene Roddenberry envisioned. Because he said the Starship Enterprise was a metaphor for Starship Earth. And the strength of this starship lay in its diversity, coming together and working in concert as a team for a common goal. And that's what I sense happening here. And yes, there is a lot of diversity, and there are a lot of different ideas, and I'm all for free speech. I think, we should all exchange ideas and keep our minds open. But what I am strongly against is people who want to pass laws to muzzle other people. That is against what the core American values. I hear it all here. This is the kind of audience that really understands what Star Trek was all about. So, with that preface, let's begin our conversation. I'll hand it back to our maestro.
Thank you, George. Let's start. I've got a couple questions, and then after that, we're going to take some questions from the audience. So if you want to line up with the mic over there, and if you want to send me a question over Twitter, send it to @TrekMovie from your seats, and I'll try to get it in the queue. Yeah. Well, let's start with what you were just talking about, George, about your activism. I mentioned that you're all over TV this week. You're on MSNBC, you're on the CBS 1 what's trending, which I guess means you're trending at this point, where you got planked. Does anyone here know what planking is? Anyone?
I didn't know until that.
So George was planked. It was pretty graphic, I thought. No, planking is. Let's first say you were talking about.
Demonstrate.
George, can you? I don't know. So planking is when you sit really straight on something and someone takes your picture. And
I really don't understand what it's all about. It's lying straight with your face down for just a few seconds. I mean, what's the point? I really don't get some of these crazy trends that happen. And one person, I'm told, even died because he laid down straight on a slanted roof and he started rolling and fell off. I mean, it's crazy. It's nonsense. It's not worth dying over. And what Chris Hardwick did was lie flat on the back of the sofa with his face down, or actually his face on my shoulder, and that got applauses. I mean, anyone can do that.
Anyone, George?
You especially. Here's the back of the chair. Frank, I'll give you my shoulder. No, I guess everyone can't do it. Right, Tony?
So you put out this viral video about a week ago where you discussed something you were just talking about. I want to hear more about it. There's law in Tennessee, and so where people they're discussing whether or not it's okay to discuss being gay in schools. And you thought you'd make some fun of that, and you created this video, and you got 1 million views, and you were on TV, on the news channels, and you're kind of creating buzz. Do you think that we've turned a corner, and how do you think the internet has just, so tell people about the video, and do you think that the internet is really making a difference and changing perceptions on these kinds of things?
Well, I do believe that change is happening, and we are making progress, but there are always the cavemen who never learn from our history. Because in 1925 in Tennessee, we had another big national debate. It was on evolution. It was called the Scopes Monkey Trial. And we had two great attorneys, both of whom ran for presidents, Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan, who debated because in Tennessee they were trying to silence the teaching of evolution. Well, deja vu all over again in the 21st century. It is not law yet. We said law. It's not law. It's just the Tennessee State Senate that passed a bill outlawing the use of the word gay and any discussion of homosexuality by teachers from middle school down. Now, certainly there is, age-appropriate conversation, but to try to pass a law criminalizing speech is outrageous, because we have the Constitution of the United States. I mean, all Americans mostly should know about the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, while these legislators, when they took their oath of office, are supposed to have taken their oath of office on the Constitution of the United States. They apparently have not read it, because the Senate bill says that teachers are forbidden, if they use the word gay or have anything to do with homosexuality in their discussion, they are penalized, I think, thousands of dollars. I mean, they're making it a criminal offense. This was passed by the Senate, but it was not passed by the state house, so it's not law yet. And we want to squelch it while it's in the bud. But I thought it was ridiculous, and the best way to fight this kind of ignorance is to make a mockery out of them. So I said in this YouTube PSA, my name, Takei, rhymes with gay. So in Tennessee, if teachers want to use my name as a substitute for gay, they're more than welcome to do that. And so I suggested they can proudly support Takei marriage. They can proudly march in a Takei pride parade. And this coming holiday season, they can sing, "Don't we know why Takei apparel?" So that's the history behind that YouTube. And Rachel Maddow really loved it, and she talked about it on her TV show, and that got us another billion retweets.
And you're selling the shirts and buttons?
Yes, and all the profits go to charity to support LGBT organizations. Where can people go to get it? It's okay to be Takei, no capitals, no spaces. It's okay to be Takei.com. Or you can go to my website, there's another click you can do to get directly to the source.
Now, so we were just talking about what you were doing this week. Let's go way back.
Yes, sir.
You made a movie called Hell to Eternity with Jeffrey Hunter in the 60s, early 60s.
Actually, it was in the late 50s.
Late 50s.
And I was there at that same studio. That was an Allied Artists production. I was just there a couple of nights ago to do a TV fundraiser for, as you all know, on March 11th there was a horrific magnitude 9 earthquake off the coast of northeastern Japan. And then that was followed by an incredible tsunami. I mean, you saw the ocean rise, and it became a wall of water that came rolling in, and then it started to engulf boats out there, and then it came to land, and it engulfed the trucks and buildings, the factories, and people, and rolled in. It was almost science fiction. And then the tsunami did incredible damage to the nuclear power plant, and there was that terror of that silent terror of nuclear radiation. I mean, it was a calamity on top of a catastrophe upon a disaster. And so I did a PSA urging people to send aid to the people of Japan. It was still winter there in northeastern Japan. It was still snowing, and they had no shelter, no drinkable water. I mean, it was water that destroyed them, but there was no drinkable water, very little food, and many of them had lost not only their homes, but their entire families. I mean, the need was desperate, and so the immediate need was great then, but now the need is for the rebuilding of the infrastructure. So I was doing a television PSA at that very studio where I did Hell to Eternity. It was called Allied Artists Studios then, and now it's called KCET, a local television station. And so it was deja vu there too. I guess if you live long enough, you're going to have a lot of deja vu kind of experience.
And that film starred Jeffrey Hunter, and the nerdier Star Trek fans out there will recognize his name as the original Captain Pike from The Cage.
And the very first pilot. Right. There were 2 pilots, right?
Now, famously, Jeffrey Hunter wasn't interested in coming back for the second pilot, opening the door for William Shatner, who became Kirk, obviously. So here's a question for you. You worked with Jeffrey Hunter. You worked with William Shatner. You were there when the decision was made.
I worked with Bill Shatner after we did that for a second pilot, and before the pilot was sold. I did a thing called, it was called Alcoa Playhouse. And Bill played a Schweitzer-like doctor in the jungles of Southeast Asia. And I played a young attorney with a British education, and it was a British crown colony, so I had one of those white wigs and black outfit. And we talked about whether that pilot for this sci-fi thing is going to sell or not. So, yes, I worked with both Jeffrey and Bill before Star Trek became an actual series.
So, someone, you know the actors, you obviously know the show. Do you think that Star Trek would have been the success it was if Jeffrey Hunter, who's a great actor, played Jesus, so he's got to be good, right? Do you think it would have been the success it was if he said, you know what, I will do it, I will come back for that second pilot, or do you think that Shatner is what was needed?
Well, you know, actors are important in projects, but the core of what contributes to the success of a series, I think, is the idea, the story, and what it's all about. And it's really Gene Roddenberry that made Star Trek the great success that it was. Jeffrey is a wonderful actor and a very good-looking guy, and a nice guy too. And I enjoyed working with him. And you know, Bill is a singular kind of actor, and he has his own quality. And what does that laugh mean?
Singular, his own kind of quality. Come on.
Well, don't you all agree? He is singular. Thank God there's no other like him.
He's not.
Same language. I'm trying to be, how do I put it?
Nice.
What?
Nice.
Nice.
Diplomatic, kind of, you know, tangential, trying to be, yes, you said it, nice. And I think that's such a wonderful part. Any good actor, and I'd like to have seen Jeffrey continue with it, because he would have brought his own quality to it. But what made Star Trek this long-lasting success is that core idea, the vision that Gene Roddenberry had of the human future. You know, saying that if we have confidence in our problem-solving capabilities and our ability to invent and innovate, then we will be able to boldly go where no one has gone before. And it was that connected with all of you, I think. And that's why you have stayed with us for 45 years. And, you know, at this point now, at 45 years, I'm really looking forward to the golden anniversary. It's only 5 more years.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
let's all get it together.
I'm going to ask another question and then we'll go out to the audience. So, I know you're trying to be nice, but let me ask you again.
I think the word I was searching for was circumspect.
Good word.
Obviously, you and Bill have had your differences. They've been aired on The Tonight Show and on Conan, and you know, so it's
And Howard Stern.
And recently, and you're not the only. Obviously, Walter Koenig, your co-star, and others have had voiced issues in the past. Now, Walter recently appeared. I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
No, I have not. People have told me about it.
It was very interesting. Bill Shatner has a show on the Bio channel called Shatner's Raw Nerve.
He's been trying to get me on it, and I have diplomatically been passive.
Well, that's really what you should watch the one with Walter. Walter really let him have it, and he talked about scene stealing and all sorts of stuff. And Bill was like, really, you guys?
He just still doesn't get it.
But here's the thing. Bill actually, so I said, maybe do you think you'll reconsider and have a bury the hatchet session with Bill?
Let me tell you something about it. When Brad and I decided to get married, we wanted to be inclusive as possible. Again, you know, the Star Trek philosophy. And yes, Bill and I have a history, but, you know, we didn't really want to bring that kind of tone into our wedding, because a wedding should be a happy, joyous thing. So we sent invitations to all my colleagues from Star Trek, as well as our larger sphere of friends and relatives. They all responded. They civilly, you know, RSVP'd, except for one. Bill never RSVP'd. But that's typical of Bill, because we've all had many other occasions when we sent out invitations to everybody, and Bill never, ever showed up. Or particularly Star Trek-related events, like if any of us got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, you know, we invited all our colleagues there, and we all went to celebrate and say good things about each other at the ceremony where the star is unveiled. Except Bill. Bill never shows up at those things. And so when Bill did RSVP, we thought, well, that's typical. It's classic Bill. And so we didn't think anything of it. But a month after the wedding, he goes on the internet publicly to rant and rave about George not inviting him to our wedding. We were absolutely mystified, you know, because he did get an invitation. And he goes around, you know, he says there must be something psychotic. I mean, he's a psychiatrist now, about George not sending him an invitation. And so we were absolutely baffled by this until we were driving down Sunset Boulevard, and there was a huge billboard advertising William Shatner's new talk show, William Shatner's Raw Nerds. And I said to Brad, that's why he ranted and raved publicly. He needed publicity. He needed attention. You know, so he will, there's no bottom to how low he'll stop. He won't stop. He'll stoop. So, you know, there's no point for me to go on a show that he controls and he can edit to his heart's content. He can ask the questions that he wants. You know, it's his turf. And I see no reason for me to tread that turf.
Let's start taking questions.
On that note, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm Casey from Down the Road Show, and I like to ask all the guests on my show the same barrage of questions, real quick answers. Who's your favorite superhero? Who's your favorite villain? And as a publicly Takei man,
Good for you. It's okay to be Takei.
exactly. Who is your personal hero in life? Who inspires you every day?
My favorite superhero, which I gather is from the comic hero realm, is Superman, the classic. And they have a wonderful collection of Superman comic books that from my boyhood. They weren't first editions or anything like that, but they were just, you know, comic books that I enjoyed, that I collected. But when I went off to college and came back on summer holiday, I discovered that my mother had given it to the trash man because it was old newspaper that was there. It was heartbreaking. So that was my college year disappointment about superheroes. My favorite villain, I don't know whether I have a favorite villain or not.
Con?
That's great.
No, he's not that bigger than life. He's still human. Let me give some thought to that. My hero, my personal hero, is my father, because I really think I had a very special man for my father. My father was certainly of his generation, you know, a Japanese American of that generation, and to be broad-minded enough to, he wanted me to be an architect. And so like a good son, I started studying architecture in Berkeley. But after two and a half years there, I just couldn't, you know, the theater and acting fire was in my belly. And the more I got closer to that decision point where my career commitment would be as an architect, I didn't want to give up that opportunity to give myself that chance to test my wings. And so I came back to Los Angeles, and I said to my father, I want to go to the Actors Studio, Daddy, and study where all the great ones came from. Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, James Dean. And he said he knew this discussion would be coming up eventually. And he was prepared for a deal for me. He said, you want to go to Actors Studio, that's a fine acting school. But when you finish there, they won't give you a diploma that says you're a legitimately educated person. He said, here in town in Los Angeles, there is a fine theater arts department at UCLA. And when you finish there, they will give you that piece of parchment, that documentation. But you're a bullheaded kid, and I know you're going to insist on going to New York. So let me remind you, New York is a crowded place, a very competitive place, and a very expensive place. And you have to be prepared to do it all on your own. But if you go to UCLA, and that's where your mother and I want you to go, then we will subsidize you. So you decide, New York on your own or UCLA with subsidy. I discovered I was a practical kid. But you know, few fathers of that generation would have that kind of open mind and willingness to support what I really wanted to do, because he knew who I was. He knew that he was saddled with that ham, and he had to make that compromise on his part, and so I'm eternally grateful for that. But even more than that, you know, I spent 4 years of my childhood in 2 barbed wire internment camps, two U.S. internment camps, one in the swamps of Arkansas and another on the Northern California border between Oregon and California. And many people of my father's generation were very embittered by that experience, you know, because we were innocent. We had done nothing wrong. We were just, you know, people who looked like the people who bombed Pearl Harbor. And because of that, this government did one of the most egregious things, a violation of our Constitution. There were no charges, there were no trials. Simply because we looked like this, they rounded us up and put us into these barbed wire prison camps. And my father was one of the few. When I became a teenager, I asked him a lot of questions about that. And he said, despite all his experiences and the loss and the pain that he went through, he said, both the strength and the weakness of American democracy is in the fact that it's a true people's democracy. And it can be as great as a people can be, but it's also as fallible as people are. And that's why good people have to be actively engaged in the political process, holding the ideals of this government, you know, to the fire, and make this a better. Well, thank you for that, on behalf of my father. He was a wonderful man, and in many ways, I think he was a great man. and because of his good guidance. You know, I am active in the political arena as he guided us to be. Both my brother and my father encouraged us to be active in student government as well, and we were both student body presidents, and I'm still actively engaged in the political arena, in large part because it's a tribute to my father and his belief in American democracy.
Thank you. I think we're all happy you guys compromised. Mr. Takei, welcome to Phoenix. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. We
Last
love Arizona. We've got a place up in the White Mountains as well, so I feel like I'm a citizen of Arizona as well.
Last time I saw you was...
You know, if we can expand my voting rights to Arizona, I'll run for office here. Thank you.
Well, the last time I saw you, it was 1976. I was in high school. It was at the last great True Star Trek Fan Fest at the old Commodore Hotel next to Grand Central Station.
Right.
And I cut class that day to be there.
Bless your heart.
I was also going to ask more about the movie Hell to Eternity. How did that impact your career, you think, since you did work with Jeffrey Hunter? And also, on a personal level, what that meant to you. And I know you're working on a play about your time in that internment camp. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the movie Hell to Eternity with Jeffrey Hunter and David Jansen and Vic Damone and Sesshu Hayakawa, the Japanese actor who got an Academy Award nomination for Bridge Over the River Kwai, was a wonderful experience for me working with these actors. But it was also a historic film in that it was the first Hollywood film to deal with the internment of Japanese Americans. The story was about a young Mexican-American who grew up with, in fact, almost was adopted by a Japanese-American family in East LA, where I was born. And, you know, can you imagine a Mexican-American being played by Jeffrey Hunter? So he understood the Japanese language and also the Japanese culture. When his family was interned, he considered his adoptive mother, Japanese-American mother, his mother, and he visits one of the internment camps to visit his adoptive mother. So this was the first film, a Hollywood film, to deal with that dark chapter of American history. So it was a very important film. But when I wrote my autobiography, and the first third of it is about my boyhood in those two U.S. internment camps, and I did a nationwide tour, I discovered that the people east of the Rockies, who seemed otherwise informed, educated people, came up to me and said, I had no idea something like this happened in the United States. In large part because our history books are rather mute on the internment of Japanese Americans. And so I've always had in mind the idea of turning the first third of my autobiography into a script, either for the movies or television. But I met a wonderful composer, lyricist, and he sold me on the idea of doing it as a musical. You know, people might think, a story on the internment of Japanese Americans as a musical, because we think of musicals as a happy, singing, dancing sort of thing. But we've had some powerful and enormously successful Broadway musicals that deal with serious historic issues, like Les Miserables. That's about the French Revolution. Or Miss Saigon, which is about the Vietnam War. And we've had some other successful musicals that deal with rather unpleasant subjects like Sweeney Todd You know, a murderous barber who slits the throat of his customers, and then they take the meat from the dead body and bake it into a meat pie, which becomes enormously popular. So I understood what this guy was telling me, that you can reach both the heart and the mind via music, and he created some sample songs for me, which was deeply moving. So for the last 3 years, we've been working on developing this musical called Allegiance, because it was our allegiance that was questioned by this government. We've had 3 readings of it. The first one we did was at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, testing it with the hardest, most critical audience, people who went through that experience itself. And at the end of it, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. And then we did another one in New York, and we got Lea Salonga, who won a Tony Award for Miss Saigon in one of the principal roles. And it went over terrifically in New York as well. We've had another reading in New York, and so we are going to open next summer, not this summer, but summer of 2012, which is the 70th anniversary of the signing of Executive Order 9066, the presidential order that justified rounding us up and putting us in these prison camps. We're going to open in the summer of 2012 at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, which isn't that far from Phoenix. So you all come down. We open it in July. And then, in the fall, we take it to New York and the Great White Way, that big, wide stage of Broadway. So we're really excited about this. We're putting the title Allegiance, and remember the theater, the Old Globe Theater, that wonderful theater that sent many musicals that became big hits. The Full Monty opened at the Old Globe. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels opened there. They were the typical musical comedy, singing and dancing and a little nudity in the Full Monty. It wasn't a little nudity; it was total nudity. But that's where we're going to open, and it bodes well with all that kind of success that they've had. So y'all come down to San Diego in 2012, and then if you want to come all the way to New York, come to Broadway and see Allegiance with me, with Lea Salonga, and a wonderfully gifted composer lyricist for Jay Poe. He's going to be the next big sensation on Broadway.
We've got George maybe for 5 more minutes, or do you only have one question maybe? Left?
I'll make more.
Thanks for the pressure. As an out, proud SBA nerd, I just want to thank you. Now, I actually have a question. I have a small YouTube show called Nerd Chick, and my viewers asked me to ask you this question because I had asked them. Quick story. I had a dream the other night that was slightly romantic, involving the cast of Doctor Who. Deal with it. The problem was, it wasn't with who I thought it would be. It wasn't Amy Pond. It was the Doctor. Now, I woke up and to quote you was, oh my. Here's my question that I asked the viewers, and they've asked me to ask you. Is it possible that being a nerd can trump being gay?
It's okay to be a nerd gay. A nerd. You can be both, in equal parts.
So the question is there anyone nerdy enough to make you go?
As Spock would say, there are always possibilities.
thank you for all the wonderful charity work you've done for the LGBT community, the people of Japan, and everybody that you've helped over the years. Thank you very much.
Well, we're all...
And I want to ask you about Super Ninjas. How did you actually get involved with that project?
Well, you know, it came at me in dribs and drabs. I also support a Asian American theater company, which is the oldest minority theater company in America. There was an African American company in New York, in Harlem, but they went belly up, unfortunately. And so the East-West Players of Los Angeles became the oldest minority theater in America. And I was at their annual gala dinner 2 years ago, I think. And I met these two guys who came up to me and said they're developing a series, and they're thinking of me as the ninja master. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Well, thank you very much. Because many people come up to me with ideas, you know, that don't go anywhere. So I thought it was going to be something like that. And then last year, I did a commercial for Shark Television, in which I also used "oh my." You know, it's a common phrase, and it seemed appropriate. But apparently, people took it in the Howard Stern context, and it became very popular. And again, I bumped into one of them, and they said they're developing it. And I thought, oh, well, that's fine. They're still with it. And then my agent called late last year and said there's an offer for me for this new series called Super Ninjas, and they want me to be the ninja master. And I thought, oh, so this is what they were talking about. So it was about the last 2 years that I kept getting word about that. And last year we did the pilot, and then, you know, there's always that pins and needles season. Is it going to sell or isn't it? And it did sell. We started filming this February, and we've been having a great time. In fact, as a matter of fact, we're filming it at Paramount, just 2 sound stages down from where we did Star Trek. Star Trek was on stage 31. That's where the Enterprise was. And on stage 32 was where the alien planet surface was. And 2 stages down is stage 24. They don't follow numerical order. And that's where our ninja dojo cave is. And that's where I inhabit. And I become a hologram. And my grandson and his buddies call me holograms. And I've had kids come running up to me yesterday saying, holograms, holograms. It's so refreshing at a convention like this where everybody calls me Sulu. I have a new identity. And these figures are ensuring the future of my career. I will live long and prosper.
George's going to be signing at 11:30 downstairs, so you can get that. And he's got photos at 2:50, and then he's signing again at 3:30. And I was just saying what you were just talking about, George. You're going to be on the Paramount lot later this year shooting Super Ninjas. You're going to be 2 sound stages away from a certain J.J. Abrams shooting another Star Trek movie. Who here would like to see him in that movie? Thank you very much, George.
Put in a good word for me.
Or Harold H. Umar.
Great sharing morning with you.